You signed your name to something this week. One ancient chapter calls that a sin and names the teacher. In 364 AD, the Council of Laodicea listed the books that could be read aloud in church. Enoch was not on it, banned, hidden, called dangerous. But in Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church never stopped reading it. Their Geza manuscripts preserved every name the Western Bibles lost, including Ptolemy's. Chapter 69 of 1 Enoch, verse 9. He taught mankind writing with ink and paper. In the next several minutes, you'll see those 4 verses, the punishment he never got, and where the charge still binds you. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover another name the church tried to bury. If you open the 4th chapter of Genesis, all you get is this: 3 brothers, sons of Lamech. Jabal, the father of those who dwell in tents and keep cattle. Jubal, the father of all who handle the harp and the pipe. Tubal-Cain, instructor of every artificer in bronze and iron. It is a short, deliberate list of where civilization came from, 1 verse each, and the scribe who compiled it was plainly interested in the question. Herding, music, metalwork. Writing is not on it. The book that troubles itself to record the origin of the flute does not record the origin of the alphabet, and it never comes back to fill the gap. What the canonical text does instead is stranger than silence. In Exodus, chapter 31, verse 18, the tablets handed to Moses are written with the finger of God. Writing there is not a human invention at all. It is something God does personally, and the first author in the Bible is God. Then you turn to Jeremiah, chapter 8, verse 8, and the prophet rounds on the scribes of his own nation and tells them the lying pen has worked falsehood, that the men entrusted with copying the law have made it into a lie. So the tradition holds the same object in 2 hands, divine act, an instrument of forgery. And it never says where the craft came from, and it never names anybody. But the older Jewish tradition was not nearly so restrained. The list survived, but only because someone took it the long way round. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce was returning from Ethiopia. He had spent 5 years in the Ethiopian highlands trying to trace the source of the Blue Nile. He brought back 3 copies of the complete Book of Enoch in Geza, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopian Christianity. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church had never stopped reading it. The Western churches had simply forgotten. Bruce deposited a copy at the Bodleian Library at Oxford, where it sat largely ignored for nearly 50 years. In 1821, an Oxford professor named Richard Lawrence finally translated it into English. In 1912, Robert Charles produced the standard critical edition, published by Oxford University Press, working from Ge'ez, Aramaic, and Greek at once. When I quote from 1 Enoch in this episode, I am quoting from Charles. Normally, I would take you to the cliffs above the Dead Sea. Cave 4, 1952, 11 Aramaic manuscripts of Enoch among the wreckage, reassembled by the Polish priest Joseph Milik and published by Oxford's Clarendon Press in 1976. The Ethiopian church kept the text, and the desert kept the proof. Not for this chapter. Chapters 37 to 71, the section scholars call the Book of Parables, are not at Qumran. Not a page, not a line, not one identifiable scrap. Milik drew the hard conclusion from that silence, arguing the parables were a late Christian composition, perhaps as late as 270 AD. The field rejected the dating, on the ground that absence from one library will not date a book. It now places the parables in the 1st century BC or the 1st century AD. Milik did not change his mind. He was reading an empty space, and the space is still empty. So Ptolemyu exists in exactly one language. There is no Aramaic Ptolemyu. There is no Greek Ptolemyu. There is a Ge'ez spelling, copied by Ethiopian hands, carried out of Gondar in a Scotsman's baggage in 1773. If Bruce had come home empty, this watcher would not have a name. How the West lost it is shorter and less dramatic than it is usually told. Laodicea, in 364 AD, listed what could be read aloud, and Enoch was absent from it. 3 years later, in 367 AD, Athanasius of Alexandria sent out his 39th Festal letter and fixed the canon for the Latin and Greek churches by omission rather than prohibition. Jerome and Augustine followed. Ethiopia never adopted any of it and kept reading. Not a conspiracy, a list, a letter, in one church that was not on the mailing list. Everything you are about to hear reached you down that single channel on stretched goatskin because someone wrote it down. So here is what the text says. And the fourth was named Penemu. He taught the children of men the bitter and the sweet, and he taught them all the secrets of their wisdom. And he instructed mankind in writing with ink and paper, and thereby many sinned from eternity to eternity and until this day. For men were not created for such a purpose, to give confirmation to their good faith with pen and ink. For men were created exactly like the angels, to the intent that they should continue pure and righteous, and death, which destroys everything, could not have taken hold of them, but through this their knowledge they are perishing, and through this power it is consuming me. That is 1 Enoch chapter 69, verses 8 through 11, exactly as Charles rendered it in 1912. Now hold that against the first English version, 91 years earlier. Richard Lawrence, working the same Geza at Oxford in 1821, gives you this. He discovered to the children of men bitterness and sweetness, and pointed out to them every secret of their wisdom. He taught men to understand writing and the use of ink and paper. The temperature differs. The substance does not. Michael Knibb, working from the Ethiopic in 1978, keeps ink and paper. Ephraim Isaac, translating directly from Ge'ez in 1983, keeps ink and paper. 4 translators, 4 generations, 1 stubborn phrase. And it is a strange phrase because paper is an anachronism in that world. The people who wrote this were working on papyrus, on skin, on potsherds. Paper as we mean it was a Chinese technology that had not reached them. The translators keep the word anyway, because the Ge'ez idiom points there, and because the scribe who wrote the sentence was not conducting a survey of writing surfaces. He was pointing at a desk. Now look at what the list actually is, because the order matters. Start with the correction, and it is a large one. Penemu is not one of the 20 chiefs. He is not in the muster roll of chapter 6. He is not in the teaching list of chapter 8, alongside Azazel and the swords and the eye paint. He never swore the oath on Mount Hermon. Anyone who tells you he did is reading 2 separate documents as though they were one. Penemu belongs to a second, much shorter roster in chapter 69, 5 figures whom Charles's text calls Satans. Jachan, who led the sons of God down. Asbiel, who supplied the evil counsel. Gadriel, who showed men the weapons of death. Penemu, 4th. And Casdasia, 5th. Different chapter, different stratum, quite possibly 2 centuries of composition between them. Then look at what he actually teaches, in order, because writing is 3rd on the list. And the first 2 are not decoration. He shows the children of men the bitter and the sweet. Then all the secrets of their wisdom. Then writing? The bitter and the sweet reads most naturally as discernment, the plain human faculty of telling one thing from another, and preferring one, which is, of course, the exact commodity on offer at a certain tree in a certain garden. The scribe is not being subtle. He is saying that the capacity to judge came first, and that writing is what made judgment portable. And now the crime itself, which is narrower than the title of this video suggests and much more interesting. Read verse 10 again. It does not say that writing is a sin. It says men were not created for such a purpose, to give confirmation to their good faith with pen and ink. The offense is the written guarantee, the document that exists because your word alone will not do. I will concede the obvious skeptical reading here, and it is a good one. This looks like ordinary priestly conservatism, an oral establishment resenting the technology that dissolved its monopoly, dressing the grievance up as cosmology. Every literate class has produced somebody who thinks literacy went too far. What that reading does not account for is that the complaint was written down by a scribe, in ink, inside a document whose entire authority depends on being a book that can be copied and carried. He hated the pen enough to record it with a pen. Someone wrote that down, and knew what they were doing. There is one more thing in this chapter that almost nobody notices, and it changes the flavor of the whole passage. 4 verses later, the same chapter turns to Kesbiel and to the hidden name, the oath by which heaven and earth were founded, a name of such power that the text will not print it, and says the world is held in place by it unspoken. So chapter 69, start to finish, is a chapter about the power of words. It puts the unwritable name and the written contract side by side in the same breath, and it approves of exactly one of them. And then the consequences arrived, except that here they do not. Set the baseline first, so you can see the shape of the whole. This is what heaven does to a watcher who teaches a forbidden craft. From chapter 10, verses 4 through 6. And again the Lord said to Raphael, "Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. And place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light." A named archangel, a named location, a named method, a stated duration. That is a watcher sentence, and it is what this channel usually spends a whole episode on. Penemu gets none of it. No archangel is dispatched for him. No valley, no desert, no opening in the ground. No rocks, no chains, no seal, no term of years, no date of release. Chapter 69 states his crime, notes that it has run from eternity to eternity and until this day, and moves on to the 5th name. Because the sentence in this passage falls somewhere else entirely. Read the back half of verse 11 again. Men were created exactly like the angels, and death could not have taken hold of them, but through this, their knowledge they are perishing. The teacher is not punished in this text, the students are. And the punishment is mortality itself. Everywhere else in Enoch, the fall of man is an assault. Angels come down, they take wives, humanity is the casualty. Here, humanity is not the victim. It is the party that accepted delivery. And this is not the only ancient culture that looked at writing and flinched. About 3 centuries before the parables were composed, in a completely unconnected tradition, Plato wrote the Phaedrus. In it, the Egyptian god Thoth brings the invention of letters to King Thamus and presents it as a remedy, a cure for weak memory that will make his people wiser. Thamus refuses the gift. He tells Thoth it will plant forgetfulness in the souls of those who learn it, that they will trust the outward marks instead of remembering from within, and carry the appearance of wisdom without the thing itself. 2 civilizations, no contact, no shared scripture, both looking at the alphabet and deciding it came with an invoice attached, both naturally recording the objection in writing. The chapter closes with the Son of Man seated on the throne of glory, in the sum of judgment handed to him, the corruptible passing away, and the sinners destroyed off the face of the earth, which leaves you holding a book that promises the end of corruption, delivered to you by the craft it just indicted. No prison, no archangel, no release date, just a charge and the fact that someone wrote it down. Now take the charge literally, because that is where it stops being ancient. Verse 10 does not object to poetry. It objects to a specific act, men using pen and ink to confirm their good faith. In 1677, the English Parliament passed an act with the formal title, An Act for Prevention of Frauds and Perjuries, 29 Charles II, Chapter 3. History knows it as the Statute of Frauds. It provided that certain promises, contracts for land, guarantees of another person's debt, agreements that could not be performed inside a year, would not be enforceable in a court unless they were in writing and signed by the party to be charged. Read that carefully. Not immoral, unenforceable. English law had arrived at the formal position that a man's spoken word was insufficient evidence of a man's spoken word, and it wrote that position into statute. Section 4 of that act is still on the books today. 323 years later, the 106th United States Congress passed the Electronic Signatures in Global and National Commerce Act and carried the identical principle into the electronic signature, defining a signature so broadly that a sound, a symbol, or a process will do, provided you meant it, which is why a click can bind you to 40 pages you did not read. Your mortgage is verse 10. Your lease is verse 10. Every terms of service you have ever accepted is verse 10, running at industrial scale on a planet of 8 billion people who confirm their good faith with pen and ink several times a week and have built the entire economy on top of it. Then there is the trace you can photograph. In the Piazza district of Addis Ababa at the Hamere Berhan Institute, Ethiopian Orthodox priests and lay scribes make manuscripts the old way. Goat skins soaked, stretched on frames and scraped into parchment. Bamboo cut and sharpened into pens with a razor blade. Black ink mixed on the premises from soil and barley water and crushed leaves. A separate pen kept for the red. Agence France Press photographed the workshop in 2023. One of the priests there, copying a life of the saints in Geza, said a small book could take 6 months. They get through several thousand goat skins in a year, mostly donated. Sit with what that workshop is. It is the craft of chapter 69, still being performed by hand in the language of the only surviving manuscripts of chapter 69 by the one church that never stopped reading chapter 69. The sentence against the pen being copied out with a pen this year. And the letters themselves are still here. Jazz script is the one indigenous African writing system in continuous daily use. Still the liturgical hand of the Ethiopian and Eritrean churches. Still the ancestor of the characters that tens of millions of people type into phones every day. Accusation and vehicle are the same object. They always were. One thing I will not oversell. You will read in a good deal of reference literature that the name Penemu derives from a Semitic root meaning inner, or the inside, which fits a watcher who deals in secrets rather too neatly. It may be right, it cannot be tested. There is no Hebrew copy of this chapter and no Aramaic copy of this chapter anywhere on earth. What we have is a Ge'ez spelling of a name that was probably Semitic once, and that is the entire file. 2,000 years, one channel, one reason it exists at all. Somebody wrote it down. In my reading, chapter 69 is not a complaint about literacy. It is a complaint about trust. The scribe is not describing a species that learned to write. He is describing a species that stopped being able to take each other at their word and then industrialize the gap. Everything that follows from that, the contract, the receipt, the affidavit, the notary, the audit trail, the signature block, is scaffolding erected over a hole in us. He thinks the hole is the fall. Whether he is right about that is a separate question. And I notice it is not a flattering one in either direction. And yet one line in the passage still refuses, at least for me, to sit straight. It is the end of verse 11. Everything up to that point is a report. Third person, steady, about mankind. Then, without warning, the sentence turns and says, "Through this power, it is consuming me." That word, me. Somebody in that sentence is being consumed, and the text does not say who. It could be Enoch, watching from inside the vision. It could be the angel conducting the tour, reciting the roster, or it could be death itself, granted one clause of its own voice at the end of a list of angels, which would be the strangest reading and, I think, the best one. I have read that verse a good many times now. I have not made up my mind. Which brings us to the question underneath this whole episode. If verse 10 is right, and the written guarantee is evidence of a fault rather than a repair, then every safeguard we have built since is a monument to that same fault. And the most careful civilization is simply the one that trusts itself least. Next time, we go 2 verses up the same page. Gadriel, third of the 5, 1 Enoch chapter 69 verse 6. He shows the children of men the shield, the coat of mail, the sword for battle, and all the weapons of death, and from his hand they have proceeded against those who dwell on the earth from that day and forevermore. That is a full episode on its own, but it is not the reason I want to look at him, because the same verse, in the same breath, before it mentions a single weapon, says that he led Eve astray. Genesis gives that job to a serpent. Chapter 69 gives it a name and a rank. So here is my question for you. Verse 10 says, "We were not made to confirm our good faith with pen and ink." Was the first written contract the moment we lost something, or the moment we finally admitted what we already were? I would like to know which way you read it, because I go back and forth. If you enjoyed this one, give it a like. It genuinely helps the channel, and subscribing means you will not miss the next one. See you then.